Hello, everyone. Dr. Ames here. This time, I'd like to talk to you about sponsorship, product placements, and brand entertainment. Here's the learning objectives for this time. We'll talk about what really is event sponsorship and talk about some of the details of how product placements work and why they are effective. We'll talk about the benefits and the downsides of branded entertainment, and then a brief summary of communication and branding tools. Well, there's a lot of ways and examples we could use to talk about branding, but ready-to-eat food products are really something that come on the scene over the last number of years and so forth. And um, they're just a great example of how something starts with a certain marketing intent and promotional message and has a particular business model based on the technology of the times. So about 10 years ago, we started seeing promotional campaigns for ready to heat and eat brands. And these would be in microwavable containers, not always shaped the way we're used to seeing microwavable containers. And these would be very differentiated from things that had to be put into the freezer and so forth. And then, of course, today we see that this sort of idea of ready to heat and eat has gone to completely prepared meals that are mailed to you as a consumer in their entirety and contain several dishes within the meal and so forth. And indeed, you sign up for these packages for dinners or lunches or whatever it is. Um, well, this is part of a overall sort of extension of brands into the future, responding to technology and so forth. Um, this is really part of the larger topic of talking about event sponsorships, product placements, and branded entertainment and the surge in popularity. Um, these sorts of things, these things in particular, are very specific items that have come about over time and changed in the way they are applied and their popularity and usage just because of technology or the changes in consumers over time. So as consumers have been exposed to different products and ways of doing things, busier lives sort of propelled the notion that maybe we need to spend less time cooking at home, and maybe we could buy more prepared things that indeed are higher quality than we're used to talking about and so forth. And that is gone and moved into the idea of now we have chef crafted sorts of offerings in the same industry. Well, let's just zone right in on event sponsorship. And this is where a marketer provides some kind of financial support to fund an event. You are indeed the sponsor of it, so you're putting forth resources. In return, you get physical advertising, you get publicity, and it's part of a bigger campaign that exposes your brand logo and image to a wider public of consumers. It might be that it includes your target segment, or it might be that you're just looking to expand your potential consumer base. So it would be large things. Generally, an event sponsorship is something we think of as something large, but it doesn't have to be. It could really be any size. But concerts and tournaments are something certainly that we can recognize right away. There are always sponsors for large sports events, concert events, those sorts of things. But then we also see local sponsors of merchants on local events that happen at the community level. And these sorts of things can happen within your country or within your local community or within the region or state, or they can be international in scope and so forth. So the idea with an event and the sponsorship itself of an event is that major events that are in the public's mind and consciousness are going to get extensive publicity. They're going to get a lot of media coverage. This costs the marketers nothing, and it gets their brand logos and images out there frequently in front of the public. So certainly from that point of view, it's a really rich area for marketers to exploit. It does give them a chance to have face-to-face contact with consumers. If a company is sponsoring some event and a lot of consumers are there, then you will have a presence. And that presence will be engaged in marketing activities, spreading your message, your information, your logo, making it highly visible, and so forth. Now, sponsors don't have to be just an individual business. They could also be a variety of businesses. It might be the type of event that doesn't rely on just one sponsorship and indeed has many sponsorships. And so a great example of this is NASCAR. They might have 50 or 60 or even more sponsors, and each one is the sponsor of this moment or this historical playback, and this is the sponsor of this interview, and so forth. And so you can sponsor anything and you can create any type of situation for a sponsorship and so forth. And this is how one technique you could use to involve groups of businesses. And so certainly in the NASCAR setting, that works quite well. And so it does also at other large public events. The thing about sponsorships is you're going to pay because you're the sponsor. And so if you want exclusivity where you're the only sponsor, well, it will cost you. At the same time, the lack of competition and so forth, depending on the event, gives you a venue to really showcase your company, your logo, your brands, your family of products, to build brand image and awareness, to reinforce why all the customers you have are currently your customers, and so forth. So this isn't something to be undertaken lightly. You investigate them for feasibility. You make sure that you keep your personal agendas and ego out of this. This is a serious business decision that cannot be messed up. So lots of times sponsorships do revolve around sporting events, that sort of thing. And these are great ways to provide a more permanent linkage for a brand or a sport team in specific, or a sport industry in general. So these sponsorships can be as big or small or as complex as you want to make them. Here's some examples. Here's a NASCAR event here in the upper left, and we've got Red Bull, and we'll see the Red Bull car right here, and we see these other signs and placards going off into the barriers and so forth. Here we have a Citi Field, home of the Mets and all of that. Look at this, different brands, tech companies, companies that make products, familiar logos. All of these, they're all over the place. Here on the placards and the signage throughout. Digital signage, much of it, which is incredibly bright, attention getting, can be programmed and so forth. Here's an example of logo, a car sponsoring a race team and a well-known driver and so forth. These sorts of things are well-known to consumers. Sponsorships are popular because people pay attention to big events. And so if you have a good marketing message and you do it right, chances are you'll be successful. So we certainly have to talk about how do we know if we're successful or not, and that's assessment. Well, you do not do a sponsorship unless you can assess it in many different ways. And so everything you do is going to be measured and tracked and put in the database so you can pull reports up later and be able to say, this is how we did in this area. And when we looked at it from this perspective, this is how we did. And we were either successful and reached our goals or we were not. Or compared to last time we did this, here's how we did. So generally media impressions is one major way that marketers do this. The media impressions aren't something that you put out there. They're something that happen once your promotion is active and underway. So how many times the exact number of mentions or references to your company, your brand, as the sponsor of some part of an event. And so every time it gets mentioned, such and such sponsor of the 3-minute talk about this sport event happening. Every time that comes up, how many times does it come up? How many times do you get that mention? In other words, it's a media impression. So you're looking for advertising frequency. How much free publicity are you really getting here? and you start to get a notion of what is the audience size that we're reaching and so forth. You know that through the statistics provided to you by the various channels, such as television, radio, and so forth, what the audience is at any given view in time. And then you can tell by the number of references and so forth how you're doing that way. So one thing you can count is how much did I spend for all of this and how many media impressions did we get? That would be one measurement. It would be like an ROI from a certain perspective. So if you want to be successful, you've got to produce a favorable amount of media impressions. The overall effect of these impressions, where your name gets mentioned over and over as the sponsor of this little portion of something, or as the main sponsor, as the only exclusive sponsor, builds brand loyalty that's already there, it strengthens it, reinforces it, and it targets your consumer segment with your message of consistency over time. So the successful ones are really not looking for a one-time thing. They're looking for a long-term relationship between an event or an industry or a particular sport team or participant or something like that. You want your brand to be associated in the mind of the consumer with that industry or event or team and so forth, as long as it's all positive associations. So you have to find out who is getting your message and the best way, just like we do in marketing, to target that segment. And so generally, the brand should have somewhat of a reasonably good fit with the event and so forth. Maybe it doesn't really matter what the product is. If it's a product that's common to, say, household consumers, the largest group, then that's appropriate because the audience type is a generalized one, and then you will certainly segment down within that larger group, that large heterogeneous group that's the household consumers, and you'll start to focus on certain products and certain things that someone needs. That's why an insurance sponsored car at NASCAR works, just like a GoDaddy commercial sponsoring a car at NASCAR works. They're completely different products, yet both will work because the audience starts with that large heterogeneous market of household consumers, and then you segment down. So you are reaching them. All the ones that watch NASCAR are going to see your messages and so forth. You deliver the key message, you're consistent, and then you deliver it often through different media channels. It's not enough to do it one place, one time, one channel only. So everything is really the heart of IMC, Integrated Marketing Communications. Integrated is the key thing here. Now, product placements are a little bit different. Any form of entertainment is fair game for this practice. A product name, but quite often we see it in movies and television and things like that, but it'll also pop up in podcasts, meetings, staged events of all types. Product placement doesn't happen by accident, it's always on purpose, and so forth. So it is the practice of placing a branded product into the content of some entertainment. And it's always there when the content gets played again. There's the product, insert the placement every time. And so it becomes part of an established entertainment project or end product. And so we're talking movies or short films. Today, there are short films created by all sorts of people and organizations on the internet. Some include product placement and some don't. Some include it by accident because they're not marketers. But for the most part, when you see it with a seriously made film or something that's done with a certain intent to reach consumers, you will find that it is always on purpose. So podcasts will include it. TV programming of all types will include these product placements. But think about it, if we expand our net a little bit to other media channels, we're talking video games, novels. Novels can include pages before and after the end of a novel. And then we have audiobooks and ebooks. These are perfect places for different types of advertising to appear. So the same with magazines, which many of which aren't necessarily in print when they are. You see a display ad, a physical ad, but the same physical ad could appear online. But all these efforts are integrated. Nothing is done in isolation. And really what you want to do, particularly in these entertainment projects where you're part of a movie or a show, it can't seem phony if you want it to work. Now, if it seems phony and it's made for comedy purposes, it might work for you. But generally, what you're trying to create is the sense that, oh, that's part of the natural environment in that setting. And so authenticity does matter to the consumer because they're analyzing it in their mind and go, oh, they're a Coke drinker just like everybody else I know. Whatever it is, you want it to be effective, and so authenticity will certainly help. Marketers don't usually assume too many things. Everything is purposeful. So take a look at some of this product placement I've gotten for you here. Obviously, The Rock, Nike. These might be a particular type of sunglasses. I don't know, but it's pretty clear that we're talking Nike here. And then look at this one. This is interesting because the logo is purposely blurred out because you're focusing on the busy person. And what does the busy person do in many urban settings? They get coffee for the office. And even though we can't see this office logo, excuse me, very clearly, we know what that is. And we know what it is right here too. And then up here, this is no accident. Here's Coca-Cola sitting on across the counter right in front of all the panelists for American Idol. Now that is not an accident. That is product placement at its best. And it's very effective. It works because it's very casual, particularly in these instances. They make it authentic with the stuff of life. And then what happens in Castaway when Tom Hanks is on the island? He finds FedEx packages. It's the stuff of life. It could have been UPS. It could have been other shippers, but that's not there by accident. And so finally, when we talk about branded entertainment, we're really just talking about those entertainment projects I was referring to that ads are embedded in, like for product placement. And that becomes branded entertainment. So marketing a brand in any entertainment property is what we call branded entertainment. And it has a direct purpose of impressing, gathering the attention, and engaging, connecting in some way with consumers so that we can get that rapid response that we really want as marketers. So branded entertainment is really the vehicle for product placement. And it really exists because marketers started putting products slowly over time into these branded entertainment projects, particularly television and so forth. Now, the question really does become with product placement, what media projects are in development that make sense and are a good fit to put our brand into? What media projects? And then with branded entertainment, today marketers can create their own entertainment vehicle. So they don't have to necessarily go through advertising costs, arrangements with the producer of the branded entertainment. If they're making a short video to be played on YouTube or a podcast or on their website for the public to access freely, then they've created their own show. And so placement, a lot of the costs and the legalities of it go away, and you've indeed created a promotional product with product placement within it. And it just does seem like many events, because of our culture really, are certainly designed or like they were made for branded entertainment. And I've talked about NASCAR as an example a couple of times, where they're filled with a plethora of logos and brands and brand mentions of sponsorships. Okay, folks, that's all I wanted to talk about this time. I'll talk to you again soon.